The White House is attempting to clarify controversial comments President Biden made during his trip to Japan. He was responding to a question about Taiwan from Nancy Cordes.
They're already flirting with danger right now.
The president's warning took regional allies and even some of his own aides by surprise. Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made. The idea that it can be taken by force, just taken by force, is just not appropriate.
His comments quickly drew international headlines. For years, the U.S. has had a policy of so-called strategic ambiguity when it comes to Taiwan, a self-governed island that China considers its territory. A top Chinese spokesman fired back at Mr. Biden. Taiwan is purely China's internal affair, he said. We won't stand for any foreign interference. The White House sought to soften the president's stance, claiming our policy has not changed and that Mr. Biden simply committed to provide Taiwan with the military means to defend itself. As President Biden travels through Asia, he is being briefed about the spread of monkeypox, with cases now confirmed in more than a dozen nations, including the U.S. Some countries are imposing 21-day quarantines for people who are infected or even in some cases just exposed. Should Americans expect something similar?
No, I don't think so. Look, we've had this monkeypox in larger numbers in the past, number one. Number two, we have vaccines to take care of it. And so I just don't think it rises to the level of the kind of concern that existed with COVID-19.
President Biden said that he believes that the smallpox vaccine will actually be effective in slowing the spread of monkeypox if necessary. And he said that the U.S. has a lot of smallpox vaccine stockpiled. But he added, Anne-Marie, that the country should be careful until we know more about the spread.
We are going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. But first, I do want to ask about that other question, the Taiwan question. You know, I see you ask the question, Nancy, and the president's response is firm and it's a single word. It's yes. And so you sort of follow up because it's sort of surprising that he would say that. It's not the first time, though, he's come out, taken a strong stance, and then the White House has tried to walk back the words or go back to being ambiguous, if you will. But I wonder, I mean, can you walk this sort of stuff back? Is the damage already done?
Well, it depends on whether you think that this is damaging. You know, you could make an argument that it isn't that bad for the White House to kind of have a good cop, bad cop situation where the president is saying, absolutely, I will defend Taiwan, sending a message to China that it shouldn't try to take over Taiwan by force, even as the official White House position remains that it is strategically ambiguous, that it is not going to commit one way or the other to defending Taiwan. Now, as you pointed out, it only took minutes for the White House to put out a statement saying that the president didn't actually mean that he would defend Taiwan, that actually all he's saying is that he would provide Taiwan with weaponry in order to defend itself. But when I asked the president the question, you know, I made a distinction. I said, you haven't been willing to get involved militarily in Ukraine. You are giving Ukraine, he is giving Ukraine weapons, obviously. Do you feel differently about Taiwan? And he said unequivocally, yes, I will get involved militarily. So that is a big distinction there. Hard to say that what he was really saying was just that he would provide weaponry to Taiwan.
Right. And, you know, the White House reacted quickly, but so did China.
That's right. China had a spokesman right away saying that this is a domestic issue and that the U.S. and any other nation shouldn't be meddling in what China sees as a domestic issue. Now, of course, the rest of the world, certainly other countries here in the region, don't see it as a domestic issue. They see Taiwan as separate and apart from China in some important ways, and they're very concerned about what they see as increased Chinese aggression, China doing more flyovers in the Taiwan Strait. That's something that Japan is certainly very concerned about. And interestingly, I put the question to the Japanese prime minister even before I asked President Biden, what does he want the U.S. to do if China does try to take over Taiwan by force. And he says that he hopes that the U.S. will defend Taiwan, will get involved militarily. China is a major power, probably the major power in the region. And so all of these other countries are watching very warily, because if China were to take that step, their concern is, would it be emboldened to try to encroach on more territory?
Indeed, people say China sneezes and everyone else catches a cold. This is a huge power in the region, but also in the world. So, of course, anything that China does is going to have a widespread impact. So let's get back to this monkeypox question. The president actually gave a different sort of answer when he was asked that question earlier, I think, as he was getting on a plane. Can you just talk about what he's saying now?
Sure. So yesterday, when he was asked about monkeypox, he said, yes, he thinks everyone should be concerned about it. That appears to not have been the message exactly that the White House wanted to send. Yes, there are monkeypox cases in a number of countries, but it isn't widespread as far as we know right now. It is actually a difficult virus to transmit, much less contagious, for example, than COVID-19. So the president kind of moderated his message in that press conference. He said that people should be careful, but that he doesn't believe that it is as big of a concern as COVID-19. First of all, because we've seen monkeypox spread beyond Africa before, and it has always kind of died out. And furthermore, he believes that the smallpox vaccine could help to prevent monkeypox if it comes to that, where people need to be vaccinated more completely. But as of now, he says people should be vigilant, but they shouldn't be overly concerned.
Sounds good. Nancy Cordes in Tokyo. Thank you so much, Nancy.